Then this council, where you are today, it was established in 1950 by law. It has its own law. It's a public institution in the sense that it's governed by the law, and it's an advisory body to government and to parliament, both. And I stress it's an advisory body, so we do not implement policies. We give advice to government and to parliament. But what is important is the groups that are in our council. These are very important groups in our society. So it's the employees, the employers, and independent experts. And all the employers' organizations are member in our council, and all the relevant, even almost all unions are member in our council. So you have here all groups relevant in terms of working, the working population in this country. The independent experts I'll tell you a bit more about, usually university professors. We call them crown members. They are appointed by our king, but they are independent. They are not from government. They are really independent. What is also very useful to tell you is that we are independent in the sense that we do not get our funding from government. We get our funding through our chambers of commerce. All companies and businesses that are in the Netherlands inscribed in our Chamber of Commerce, in our register, they pay a small amount, a small fee for our council, and that gives us quite enough money to do our work on. So there's not any government money involved in financing this, the running of this council. So it's really independent, also in budget terms. So that gives us quite a good position to also give messages which are not so welcome to government. So they can never threaten us, we will cut your budget. They don't give us any budget, so that makes it very workable for us. You see them in action here in a meeting. We have a relatively small council, 33 members. So it's 3 times 11, the 3 groups, 11 from the employee side, 11 from the union side, and 11 crown members, the independent experts. And we also have, on all the 3 groups, we have people who can sit in for them, so it's actually 66 instead of 33. Maybe a bit about the role of the crown members. As I said, they are the independent experts, usually university professors in a broad range of fields that are relevant to our council. Their role is to give their expertise, to bring their expertise to the tables where the discussions are going on. What is also their role is to build bridges between employers and unions, and in that sense play a role of a mediator, you could say, in trying to find the common ground between what the employers want and what the unions want. And very often they are very creative in finding solutions in this mediating role, using their expertise, of course. And the third one is they are also considered to be a guardian of the public interest. So it's not just what is relevant for unions and for employers' associations, but there's also almost always an issue of what is best for the country as a whole, what is best in terms of public interest. So this is weighed also into the discussion. How do we work? This is perhaps comes most to your question on how does the culture work instead of how does the structure work. We can give advice both on request by government or by parliament, and we can give advice on our own initiative. If somebody else is asking questions, usually the government, and very often also asking questions with, if you don't come up with a good solution, I will do this and this and this. If you don't come up with a good solution, I'm going to do something else. So we do get a lot of space. Social partners get a lot of space to come up with good solutions. But usually it helps to give the threat also. So that helps to give pressure to social partners to really work on issues, even though the issues are difficult. What also helps is that if we try to make an advice on our own initiative, we have a sort of informal rule But you only do this if you know beforehand that the advice will be unanimous. So if you come up with an advice nobody's asked for, and it's split in it's not unanimous, then both the employers and the unions can go with their own points of view directly to politics. So that's a high threshold to start an own initiative advice. But we can do, and sometimes we do. We had several examples actually last year of where this council came up by its own initiative in analyzing some of the difficult issues that we as a country where we stand. For example, one of the big questions we have, why is the Netherlands doing relatively bad in these terms of crisis, while our neighbors, for example, Germany, is doing much better? And this is strange, because in a structural sense, our economy is very well positioned. We're highly innovative. We're one of the top 5 economic performers in the world. In many other parameters, we're doing really well. So what is going on? So that was one of the main questions that the social partners really wanted to know together, to understand, and from there to try to come up with solutions. So they asked this council, make this analysis, and involve us in it, try to understand with us around the table also what's going on. So we did this, and we came up with a deep analysis where the central bank was also involved, and this planning, the Economic Policy Institute. What is going on? Why is the Netherlands now different than other European countries? And part of the answer is, you can imagine, it's not simple. Otherwise it would have been solved a long time ago. It's a very complex working together of our pension system, our banking system, and our housing market. And the 3 of them are interconnected in very specific national ways. And this is a national problem that we have to solve nationally. But this is also the explanation why the Netherlands is on a different growth path now than our neighboring countries. So we have to come up with some solutions. For example, in our housing market, we have a very generous tax deductibility in our mortgage markets, which has grown through the roof over the last 10 to 20 years. So we have to change that. But this has enormous effects on our housing market. So you can imagine there's where to start and how to do this in a sensible way. And this is the kind of discussions that we have. And advice of our own initiative came out of it, with some broad guidelines on we social partners think that this should be done. And that helps government in making very tough decisions on what to do, actually. Our pension system is partly, we have a 3-pillar system in pensions. First pillar is a state pension. This is paid through taxes. So it's a government paid pension. Everybody gets it whether you work or not. You get a state pension which is at a level you can live on if you're over 65, but it's not luxurious. The second pillar is the pension you build up by working. So it's on top of this state pension. And in this second pillar, the employers and the employees pay for their pension. So there the employers' interest in the pension system is very high, because they pay 2/3 of the premium for pensions. So that's if the second pillar pension scheme, if the premiums go up, the cost for employers rise dramatically. And pension is a very expensive thing to have. So a pension is one of the most expensive things we have in this country in terms of social security for elderly people. And like, I don't know how Korea is, but we are a graying society, which means that pension is getting more and more expensive in terms to the number of population. So this is one of the main backgrounds in why pensions is very much of concern to employers. A time of economic crisis, after a period of not so much working together of unions and employers as we are doing today, but there was in the 70s there was a lot of fight going on between unions and employers associations, not physical fights like in your country, but a lot of struggle and a lot of debates going on, and they could not find each other as easily as in the later years. So this culminated in a period of economic crisis, where the government was actually making very strong reforms in a lot of fields in the labor market, in social security, and they had to because the government spending was way too much. What the unions and the employers' associations then said, well, if we do not work together, this will just come over us. If we want to be influential, we have to work together, and we have to come up with solutions and different solutions to not just be influential, but make this country work better again. So one of the solutions they came up with was the agreement in the Wassenaar Pact of actually what it is, it's burying the hatchet, putting their strides, trying to put their fights behind them and working together by making an overall pact on two very simple parameters. An agreement not to heighten the wages too much in return of working less. So you get paid as much as you always have, but you have to work less hours. So that was the main agreement. Very simple, actually. If you look back now, and I've spoken to many people who actually were at the table 30 years ago, and they said, well, when we had this agreement 30 years ago, nobody knew exactly how it was going to work out. And what it did in the end, it had several effects. It had a high trust effect between social partners. So that's a very important effect. So after 1982, many more agreements were reached on small issues, on all kinds of issues, based on the trust that was there again. So that's a very important effect. Also in companies and in sectors where it worked out, and the negotiations and the talks were going on all the time. But you can give some examples on raising the employment rate.
As I read your questions, I thought maybe you see part-time work and the increase of part-time work in the 80s as an effect, as an intended effect of the Wassenaar Accord. But as historians and sociologists now, looking back, see, they see that it was an unintended side effect of the Wassenaar Agreement. Because it were all male representatives sitting at the table in Wassenaar. They agreed on redistributing work amongst Dutch people, and one of the examples of redistribution named was part-time work, and that factor was a circumstance used by young women, highly trained, that were not working but had a growing wish to work. So young women seized the opportunity. The agreement was a condition used by young, highly educated women. That's what we see now.
So when you had the 1982 Wassenaar Agreement, what was the exact role of the government between employers and employees?
And the role of government in the agreement is not there. They were outside the agreement. It's an agreement, it's a pact between unions and employers. But it was very much embraced by government later on because it gave a very good solution to this economic crisis we're in the middle. And it gave a solution to help solve unemployment, which is unemployment benefits are state funded. Our social partners in the Netherlands, so both the unions and the employers associations, they have a very broad sense of what is good for the country. So they look at most issues, most policy issues, both from a point of view, what is my interest as a union or as an employers association, but also what is best for the country. And both our employers and the unions are known internationally to be very moderate very reasonable, very practicable. So they're down to earth. They try to come up with solutions that work, and this is a culture. So it's not driven by ideology, where you think this should be done. It's driven by what is the problem, and how can we solve the problem, and how can we solve it together. And this is the way our unions and employers associations have always, that is over the last, 60 years, have acted. They have taken responsibility in a very broad sense. And this is different than in many other countries. Also, many European countries are very different. For example, France is a country where they have also a form of social dialogue like we have here, but with unions and employers associations much further apart. Unions are much more, they fight much more, and they go on strike much more, and they do not take this kind of responsibility. Well, we have to make it work. We have to make this country stronger. And what is in the end also for unions, their main question is, does it deliver jobs and work, and can we have good wages on it? So what can you achieve, and how can you achieve it? And if that means that you have to adjust your own ways of doing, you just have to do it. So there's this sense of course, the unions have their ideologies. They have their ideas what would be good for society. But it's not very much used to talk about some form of ideal picture. It's much more, you have that in mind, and from that you go to your day-to-day business, and you try to, by doing one step today, and another step tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow, by small steps you make big changes. But you make the small steps, you do not make the big steps at one time. And we have changed over 30 years by many, many small steps. We have adjusted almost completely our social security system by small steps. But it's not. It's many small steps. But that makes it also much better to take the rest of the population also aboard. Small steps are much easier to digest by the population, to understand and to follow. If you make really big changes in policies all the time, you drive everybody crazy. So that's also part of the explanation.
So the transparency is very important, right, in this society?
It's all done in the open, but it's very difficult. It is transparent, but it's not always very easy to follow what's going on. So that's.
Yeah. So in the company's governance, the labor union join the board?
No.
They are not joining the board.
No.
Then how you can guarantee the transparency of the business management to the labor union?
Well, the board is at some points, as Veronica mentioned, obliged by law to be transparent on plans to reorganize, on plans for health and safety and policies for health and safety.
Yeah, but in Norwegian model, the 3 labor union members join the board.
Yes.
So that's another model to guarantee the transparency.
Yes. It's different than the Norwegian model that we have here. So in our board, there's nobody from the council. This is normal. No, nobody from the.
Yeah, but still, they believe the corporate governance, right? They don't doubt whether there's something. Yeah.
No, we do have discussions about corporate governance, of course, but through these work councils, a lot of the corporate governance issues are dealt with in a different way. And what we do have, but it's different than the Norwegian model, is in our supervisory board, so not in the board, but supervisory board. One of the board members can be appointed or nominated, not appointed, nominated by the unions.
Supervisory board?
On the supervisory board, yes.
And does the labor part, I mean the employees association or something, the union, ask the wage considering the global competitiveness of the firms he's working for?
We have now a long tradition of moderate wage increases. We come from the 80s, from the Wassenaar Accord, where cost flew through the roof, actually. So that had to be dampened in order to keep our international competitiveness position. And that helped very much so. So we have now a tradition of 30 years of moderate wage increases. And I saw your question, which is a very good one. Why do the unions agree on this moderate wage increases? Part of the answer is what I told you just now, that in terms of a globalizing world, what is best for the country, and in the end also best for all the workers in this country, is to have employment. So to be competitive and to have competitive, very innovative and competitive companies is best for everybody. So this is this practical, down-to-earth solution, solutions that we're all looking for. And unions do not go for the short-term highest raises in wages, which perhaps they could get, but they go for a more longer-term, what is best for this company at this moment in time, over a longer, if we look at it from a longer-term perspective. So they do get rises in wages, but moderate ones.
Yeah, but I understand that moderate wage increase happens in the Netherlands economy, but on the other side, there have been huge increase of part-timers.
Mm-hmm.
So employers treat part-time job as a regular one. It means that higher cost, it much burdens too much to employer side. So in the terms of competitiveness, it is losing the competitiveness. So how can you manage those cost increase due to part-time increase?
I think if you look at the interests of employees and employers, there are many interests at the side of the employers in part-time work. But sometimes it's also very cost-effective to have part-timers. If you have a long working day and we have strong norms on the maximum of working hours you can work in the Netherlands, then it's easier to have part-timers work, a lot of part-timers at the beginning of the day, a lot of part-timers when customers in your shop come during lunchtime, and a lot of part-timers at the end of the day. So there is a strong interest in having part-timers in some sectors, in some branches of the labor market.
Yeah.
Labor sides, for example, labor union now, the full-time staff, all of them are full-time, but to increase part-timers, they might lose some of their job. Regular member might lose some of their job because they're replaced by part-timers.
Well, that doesn't happen in the Netherlands. Dismissal laws in the Netherlands are very strict, so you cannot just fire somebody and hire somebody new. It's impossible.
So
you don't do that.
The increase of part-timers took gradually then,
Yes.
very gradually.
Yes.
Regular staff retire, and to put in that place, part-timers or full-timers?
No. The regular situation is that young women and young men start at a company or in an organization, mostly full-time, and when there are women, when the woman is expecting a child, she decreases her working hours and stays on those decreased working hours for the rest of her working career. Some young men seem to follow this example. So it's not a question of full-timers replaced by part-timers. Sometimes you start as a part-timer because having free time for your hobbies, for your friends, for your parents or your children is a very strong value in the Netherlands. So also young men and women ask for part-time jobs. They don't want to spend all their waking hours working.
So no conflict between old-timers and
No,
new-timers?
no.
Old-timers stay
No.
there, new-timers
No.
might choose full-time or part-time?
No, because
No, there's no conflict
also
there.
at the end
No.
of the working life, men and women of 55 and over have a preference, a growing preference for part-time work and for shortening their
Yeah.
working week.
Yeah, so it's done by market mechanism, not by the government policy. Yeah,
No, it's not. Government policy makes it possible.
yeah, so
That
infra,
helps.
legal infra or something
Legal
like
infrastructure.
Yes.
that. And the employer can employ the foreign immigrants freely.
Sorry?
Foreign immigrants,
Mhm.
for example, from the Eastern Europe
Mhm.
countries,
Mhm.
they might ask very low wage.
No, they cannot.
They
Because we
cannot.
have, well, we have two, different. We have a minimum wage anyway, which you have to pay and earn if you work in the Netherlands, and we have the wages set in the collective labor agreements.
And the foreign immigrants applied.
Yes,
The same
if you
standard.
work here, then you fall under this collective labor agreement, and you have to be. You cannot go. You cannot say as an individual, I don't care, just pay me half. That's not possible. Of course, there are cases where it happens, and this is called. This is an economic fraud. It's not allowed, but of course it's difficult to really detect and to punish. But we are getting more and more strict on adhering to both the minimum wage level and the wage level set in our collective labor agreements, to keep up our standards of what we think is a good working standard, which is good work, also good paying work. So this is in a European Union with economic positions very different. The Bulgarians and the Romanians are much poorer than we are. Of course, this is a difficult issue, but the normal social protections laws that we have apply to foreign workers here. So if some employer does not want to pay them at the level that they pay their Dutch colleagues, it's just not allowed.
You never experienced very serious strikes?
Some strikes, but not big ones. And well, the Netherlands, like you said, the Netherlands has one of the lowest strike levels in the world. But of course we do have strikes, but relatively small ones and not very long. And usually the strikes are not so violent as in some other countries. Usually the strikes you see here on television are actually very much fun. A lot of people laughing, and it's a day out, you could say. It's not grim. It's
No,
not fighting.
it's not grim, but
No.
it's
But it's serious, though.
Yeah.
Be no mistake. It's
yeah,
serious,
precies, yeah,
but it's not grim. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not violent.
and not aggressive.
Not
or-
aggressive. No.
And no work, no wage?
No, they get
No, no.
paid. They get
Yes,
paid
they get paid by the
by the
unions.
Union pay?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. The unions have a.
That's one of the nicest things of being a member of the union.
Thank you very much.
Well,
Thank
you
you
had
very
so
much.
many questions.